Agreement to cooperate. The United States of America, by and through J.P. McCloskey, Assistant United States Attorney for the District of Maine, and Alan Winchenbach, acting for himself and through his counsel, Sandra Collier, enter the following agreement based upon the promises and understandings set forth below. 1. Alan Winchenbach is presently under indictment in the District of Maine in the case of United States versus Enrique Caraballo et al., criminal docket number 8500001-B, and the case of United States versus Robert Hall et al., criminal docket number 84-00041-B. Alan Winchenbach is also under indictment in the District of Massachusetts in the case of United States versus Robert Kenny et al., criminal docket number 84-288-MC. 2. Alan Winchenbach was convicted in the United States District Court for the District of Maine in the case of United States versus John Cunningham et al., criminal docket number 82-00028-B. He was sentenced to a term of 12 years imprisonment. Alan Winchenbach agrees to withdraw any appeal he may have filed in criminal case 82-00028-B. 3. Alan Winchenbach agrees to enter pleas of guilty to each of the 3 indictments listed in paragraph 1. If Alan Winchenbach so desires, the United States Office for the District of Maine, the United States Attorney's Office for the District of Maine, and Massachusetts will agree to have the Massachusetts indictment transferred to Maine for disposition pursuant to Rule 20 of the Federal Rules of Criminal Procedure. The government further agrees if Alan Winchenbach fully cooperates as defined in this agreement, any sentence he might receive for guilty pleas to the 3 indictments listed in paragraph 1 shall be concurrent to the 12-year sentence he received for his conviction on the indictment listed in paragraph 2. Further, he shall not be sentenced to pay a fine for his guilty plea to the indictments listed in paragraph 1, except as may be required by Title 18, United States Code, Section 3013. 4. The purpose of this agreement is to secure the cooperation of Alan Winchenbach with the United States in order to further the investigation and prosecution of those persons involved in the illegal drug trade. Alan Winchenbach understands that the United States is conducting an investigation into the violations of various federal laws by persons involved in the illegal drug trade. The government believes that Alan Winchenbach has information regarding the criminal acts of his co-defendants and other persons who have not yet been identified in regard to the illegal importation and distribution of drugs. 5. Alan Winchenbach agrees to meet with agents of the government as designated by Assistant U.S. Attorney J. McCloskey as needed to tell fully, honestly, truthfully, and completely all he knows or has heard about concerning violations of federal law, including but not limited to his involvement and the involvement of others, and to answer all related questions in the same manner. He agrees to provide the government or aid the government in acquiring all documents, photographs, bills, records, receipts, and all like material which he has in his custody or to which he has access, which will corroborate his information. Alan Winchenbach further agrees to testify fully, honestly, truthfully, and completely at any and all grand juries, trials, and court proceedings in which his testimony is needed in the District of Maine or any other federal district. Alan Winchenbach agrees to meet with designated government agents or attorneys in preparation for such testimony at grand jury trials and other court proceedings. It is understood that should any of the information provided by Alan Winchenbach reveal any other violations of the Drug Abuse Prevention and Control Act, Title 21, United States Code, Section 801, etc., except those indictments mentioned in paragraph 1 to which he is expected to plead guilty, it will be deemed as having been given under use immunity, and it could not be used against him. He shall not receive use immunity regarding his involvement in the cases listed in paragraph 1. Nothing in this agreement will preclude the prosecution of Alan Winchenbach for any serious violent crime committed by him or at his direction, should such crime become known through statements of Alan Winchenbach or otherwise. If Alan Winchenbach should fail in any way to cooperate fully, honestly, truthfully, and completely, the government will be released from its commitments herein, and this agreement will be null and void. The determination of whether Alan Winchenbach has given a full, complete, truthful accounting of criminal activity described in paragraph 3 and 4 above, and whether he has testified fully, truthfully, voluntarily, as described in paragraphs 3 and 4 above, shall be made solely by the office of the United States Attorney for the District of Maine. But if a determination is made that Alan Winchenbach has not cooperated, it shall be based upon some articulable facts. It is further understood that should Alan Winchenbach file a motion pursuant to Rule 35, Federal Rules Criminal Procedure, to reduce his 12-year sentence for his conviction on the indictment listed in paragraph 2, the government remains free to support or oppose his motion to reduce his sentence. However, the government agrees to make known to any judge hearing such a motion the full nature and extent of Alan Winchenbach's cooperation and any other information relevant to sentencing. 9. Nothing in this agreement will prevent the United States from instituting prosecution of Alan Winchenbach for perjury, false statements, or false declaration if Alan Winchenbach commits such acts in connection with this agreement or otherwise. Additionally, Alan Winchenbach understands that the United States will not tolerate any future violations of state or federal laws by him, and should any become known, nothing in this agreement will preclude prosecution of Alan Winchenbach by appropriate authorities for such violations. 10. Alan Winchenbach understands that there are no further or other agreements, either express or implied, other than those contained in this agreement. 11. Alan Winchenbach's signature in the spaces designated signify his full and voluntary acceptance of this agreement. This agreement is made pursuant to Rule 11E-C, Federal Rules of Criminal Procedure. Richard Cohen, United States Attorney, by J. McCloskey, Assistant U.S. Attorney, dated 6/10/85. I have read this agreement and carefully reviewed every part of it with my attorney. I understand it and I voluntarily agree to it. Date 6/10/85. Signed, Alan Winchenbach, defendant. I represent Alan Winchenbach as his legal counsel. I have carefully reviewed every part of this agreement with him. To my knowledge, his decision to enter this agreement is an informed and voluntary one. Dated 6/10/85, Sandra Collier, Esquire, attorney for Alan Winchenbach. Amendment to plea bargain agreement between the government and Alan Winchenbach. The government has knowledge of Alan Winchenbach's involvement in 3 other marijuana importations, namely a 1981 importation at Dutch Neck in Waldoboro, Maine, and a 1980 importation at Dutch Neck in Waldoboro, Maine, aboard the vessel Curlew, and a 1980 importation at Dutch Neck in Waldoboro, Maine, aboard the vessel Gulf King. The government agrees not to prosecute Alan Winchenbach for his involvement in these marijuana importations. Signed, Richard Cohen by J. McCloskey, June 10, 1985. I've read this agreement and carefully reviewed every part of it with my attorney. I understand it, and I voluntarily agree to it. Signed, June 10, 1985, Alan Winchenbach, defendant. I represent Alan Winchenbach as his legal counsel. I have carefully reviewed every part of this agreement with him. To my knowledge, his decision to enter this agreement is an informed and voluntary one. Signed, June 10, 1985, Sandra Collier.